I really don't get this kind of a fella. I don't get it at all. He lived, died. He was made a complete fool of when he got his first big shot. I have no doubt that Bush and Cheney were probably sitting back and laughing at him while he was introducing ridiculous information to the UN. Not so ridiculous that it didn't get 2-3 million people killed in Iraq. As far as I'm concerned, good riddance.
Insisted that the items were there, and they weren't.
Here he says that the CIA, and they can be trusted. We're still saying 6 to 8 months into the war that the weapons of mass destruction was still there. You know, Fox News is still saying there were WMDs in Iraq. Propaganda is never admit that you were wrong. Here's Colin Powell clearly stating they were not there.
The community still insisted that the items were there, and they weren't, and they weren't, and they weren't, and they weren't, and they weren't.
When you left, you were an unhappy man.
I was glad to be moving on in my life.
Glad to leave.
Early 2004, when he was getting ready for, the next campaign.
Obviously, the war in Iraq was a big, fat mistake.
Truer words were never spoken. The Iraq and Afghanistan war is probably what ended America. It was a mistake for us, but for the wealthy and the military-industrial complex, it meant windfall profits. We left, armed and created ISIS, gave Halliburton $39 billion for pretty much next to nothing, and there you have it. And since then, we've funded ISIS.
The war in Iraq, we spent $2 trillion, thousands of lives. We should have never been in Iraq. We have destabilized the Middle East. You do whatever you want. You call it whatever you want. I want to tell you, they lied. Okay. They said there were weapons of mass destruction. There were none, and they knew there were none.
And they weren't. And they weren't.
Cognitive dissonance is when a person has such a deep belief in something and then something comes and flies in the face to contradict that belief. The military is the greatest thing that ever was. That America is the fighter for freedom and liberty around the world. It just isn't so. And listen to the crowd when Trump tells them the truth.
There were no weapons of mass
Okay, all right.
Here's an example of cognitive dissonance, especially regarding the military. This guy is completely unable to change his mind, regardless of the evidence.
When you said that George W. Bush, which was our last Republican president, a man I respect greatly, a person that we really fought for when he was up against a lot of pressure, that he lied to get us in the war in Iraq. That stung me very deeply. Okay. I don't believe that. I'm just wondering, given some time passing, perhaps you've rethought that? Would you?
Translated, it's literally impossible for me to change my mind. Would you change yours?
You willing to rethink that?
Well, a lot of people agree with what I said, and I'm not talking about lying. I'm not talking about not lying. Nobody really knows why we went into Iraq.
But I do. I know why we went into Iraq, and a lot of people in America do, people that have done their homework. This is the Project for a New American Century, another neoconservative think tank, a bunch of power grabbers. They actually wrote that crashing the Middle East would be a great thing, and they said that the process for restructuring the military would be slow going unless there was some cataclysmic event like Pearl Harbor. And 1 year later, almost to the day, came 9/11. War for money and power. This has nothing to do with spreading democracy.
You think the President of the United States, George W. Bush, lied?
Well, look, I'm not going to get you a vote, but that's okay.
I'm just giving you another shot
Let me tell
at
you
it.
something.
He's just giving you another shot at it. cognitive dissonance, completely unwilling to change their belief irregardless of the facts.
I'll tell you very simply. It may have been the worst decision going into Iraq, may have been the worst decision anybody has made, any president has made in the history of this country. That's how bad it is, okay? Here's what happens. We have spent $2 trillion in Iraq and fighting Iraq. $2 trillion. 2 trillion. Thousands of lives, right? We have wounded warriors who I love all over the place. These are the most incredible. These are braver than all of us in this room put together. I look at the attitude, and I work with them, and these are great people. We got nothing. We have nothing. We're not even there. We can't even make a phone call right now.
But to his question,
I'm trying to separate.
Let me tell you, do I
do you
know?
believe he lied, or do you think?
I can tell you this. I don't, whether he lied or not. He went into Iraq. It was a horrible decision.
After 4 attempts of trying to get Trump to take back that he said Bush lied, there at the end he gives a big positive nod as if he has made some progress and he and Trump have met in the middle.
That stung me very deeply.
Well, I hope he wasn't stung too deeply. 2.5 million dead Iraqis that had done nothing. That kind of stings me. Colin Powell states in his book that he's afraid that he'll be remembered as the jackass that made a jackass out of himself in front of a bunch of jackasses at the UN. And the truth is, he really won't be remembered at all. If so, it'll be, he was part of a cluster of war criminals that killed millions of Arabs.